Hey, what's up? It's Jesko from AcousticsInsider.com, where I teach home studio acoustic treatment techniques for audio professionals, but without all the voodoo. I'm back, 2022. I wish you all a happy new year. I've got amazing things planned for you this year. I can't talk about them quite yet, but you will hear about them very soon. Hopefully I'll be able to do some videos for you covering topics in a quality and in a depth that I just can't do on my own. I'm really happy about this. You will hear about it very, very soon. But with that, let's get into this video. First of all, I'm fighting a bad cold. I have been for about 2 weeks now. I don't know why, but it's not going away. It's not COVID, apparently. I don't know how many tests I've done, but I haven't had a voice in about a week. It's just come back. Let's hope I don't lose it as I'm making this video. So with that said, let's jump right in. This video is going to be another YouTube comments knowledge bomb. This is the type of video where I answer your YouTube questions because I feel guilty that I can't get in and answer them in person in the actual comments. So let's jump in. So this first one is by Hall of Cannons. It is about ported and non-ported speakers. They're asking for those speakers, the head Type 20 MK2 that I recently got, is it ported or is ported or non-ported an option dependent on the room? Why is it that an option, or why is that an option in the speaker design? Is closing the port like a high pass filter? I love that fader control, by the way. Been looking for something where I can move a fader and just EQ simultaneously. So yeah, just quickly, that's the console fader 1, the soft tube console fader 1. I've been loving it. In terms of EQ, it really only does high pass, low pass, but that's kind of like the bulk of EQing that you will do. To some extent, it's like 50% of the EQing that I'll do. It's a great tool. Have a look at it. But talking about the speakers, so this is something that I will hopefully cover in a lot more depth very, very soon, as I just mentioned at the top of the video. So let me just bench that for the moment, put a pin in it, and we'll get back to that question very soon in another video. Here's one by Alex. Can you make a video of setting up a home studio in less than ideal conditions for recording and mixing purposes? This entire channel is about setting up home studios in less than ideal conditions. So have a look at all the videos in there. I'm gonna do a sort of top level walkthrough of my framework very soon for you guys. So Alex, have a look out for that. But to be frank, all my videos about that. So hopefully you'll get something from that. Here's one by Bobba Louie 64. New to your channel, welcome. Great info I'm catching up on. Have you done any videos on using tube traps for bass control in corners or throughout? Thanks. So if you watch some of my videos on bass trapping, you can download my complete guide to bass traps and bass trapping underneath those videos. In fact, I'll link it under this one as well. And there's a whole section in there on tube traps. In short, I don't think tube traps are anything special. I have not seen any data that shows that they do anything else than just porous absorption material, like insulation material. And so in my opinion, they are just a more expensive, more difficult to use, inconvenient way of building a standard panel. So in my opinion, you can get the exact same, if not better results from just using standard panels, because it is just a porous absorber. But with a standard panel, it's a lot more flexible in terms of how you use it in your room. And so in my opinion, it's just a better option. Here's one by Gibson. Don't low frequency waves need more distance to travel? In a small room, there is no such space. Thanks for the video, pretty cool. This was on a video, on speaker size versus room size. So low frequencies don't need a particular distance to travel. They can travel a short distance, they can travel a long distance. When we're talking about rooms, it's a question of, does that entire wavelength, does an entire cycle of that frequency sine wave, if you will, fit within the dimensions of the room? If yes, then you will usually get an effect called standing waves. So a standing wave may build up because the wavelength fits inside that distance, inside that dimension. But if the actual frequency is lower than that dimension, all that means is that the entire cycle doesn't fit in between those two walls, and so we can't, or so a standing wave can't be generated, can't build up. Instead, what will happen is that the entire room will, kind of the pressure at that frequency will just rise in general, right? So the way to think about low frequencies in rooms that are smaller than their wavelengths is that any frequencies below that dimension will just generally increase the air pressure in that space. It's kind of like if you imagine a dollhouse and then you put a balloon inside that dollhouse and then you blow up that balloon and everything, the pressure just builds up against all the surfaces. That's sort of what's happening. Yeah. So this isn't a question of how much distance does it need to travel. It's about whether a whole cycle fits within the dimensions of the space. All right. Good question. Here's one by Tom D. I have a 14 by 13 by 8 foot room and have a monitor with an 8-inch woofer. I checked with the manufacturer to see if that's too big for my room and they said yes, but the online store I bought from says no, that size is okay. Who do I trust? Yeah, good question. In my opinion, you can trust the online store in this case. Speaker size and room size, there's no real correlation there. That's why I made that video, speaker size versus room size, which I'll link in the card right now. Basically, you can play any size speaker in any size room. There is no relation between woofer size or power and room size. There's no physical connection there. The one practical consideration that we need to take into account is whether with the larger speaker size, we can actually place it where we need to place it in order to get the sound that we want. That's the critical kind of mark, the critical question that you need to answer in order to figure out what size speaker to get. Basically, you want to get the largest speaker that you can while still being able to place it where you need to place it. Yeah, so in many small rooms, you may have to sit very close to one of the perimeters, one of the walls, in order to not sit in a massive bass dip because of standing waves. And so your space from your listening position to the wall is very limited. Now, if you then try and set up a massive speaker, the front of the speaker will be within like 1 or 2 feet from your ears. And I guess you can technically make it work in terms of just listening to the speakers, but it's not going to be a lot of fun working on a setup like that. So in that case, you want to reduce the speaker size in order to get some distance from your ears to the speaker with the speakers set up all the way against the wall. So that's the critical factor here. Don't think about woofer size or power or any of that nonsense. It's all about actual physical size of the speaker cabinet, of the entire box, and whether it still allows you to set the speakers up in a way that you get a proper stereo image and that ergonomically you still have enough space to kind of put stuff and work. Okay, so that's the critical question. Good question. Here's one by Max Weise, maybe you're German, Max Weise. Hi Esco, thank you for your helpful videos. There's a myth out there that woofers smaller than 8-inch can't produce real bass technically. Is there any truth in that comment? Okay, look, I'm not an expert on speaker design. I know enough, and in particular in terms of the interaction between the speaker and the room, but I'm not a super nerd about like the intricacies of speaker design. Just let me throw something out there. If any woofer smaller than 8-inch wouldn't be able to produce real bass, how would in-ear headphones work? Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that. All right. So this next question is by Christian Olsen. Can somebody answer me if wrapping the rock wool in thin plastic foil in Acoustics panels will harm low-end absorption significantly? I want to do this for extra health and safety. I'll answer that for you. So it definitely doesn't harm low-end absorption. If anything, it will start reflecting some high-end the thicker the plastic sheet gets. So you don't have to worry about low-end absorption. If anything, you have to worry about high-end reflection. But even then, if you use very, very thin sheets of foil, plastic foil, it's basically negligible. Like any panel you see in my room, any panel that I build or have built for customers, for clients, have always been with the rock wool wrapped in a thin layer of plastic. So I highly recommend that you do that. You don't want that stuff flying around in your room. It's not particularly dangerous while you're kind of handling it, just for that one moment, but like over time, if you've got maybe a panel unwrapped rock wool, unwrapped insulation material sitting really close to an air conditioner or some sort of air vent, maybe a fan, and it just blows on it constantly and constantly blows those fibers into your room and makes them circulate in your room, and you're inhaling them over months, maybe years, that is definitely not healthy. So definitely wrap your panels, your insulation material in a thin sheet of plastic. The thinner, the better. It's as simple as that. The thinner, the less effect it will have. But there comes a point you can buy plastic sheets that are so thin that you basically can't work with them. So just go with something that is still workable, as in you can still kind of wrap the thing without it ripping, without the plastic ripping, and then you'll be fine. Good question. Here's one by Banyus. Can you make a video about Tom Hiddley broadband absorption, please? Yeah, maybe. Basically, I'd like to know what your specific question is. The Tom Hiddley was an acoustics designer. He came up with, as far as I know, off the top of my head right now, the non-environment style control room. He has a particular way of using broadband absorption, and it's part of the overall concept of this control room. I've been thinking about doing a kind of a case study, if you will, a deep dive into the different types of control room design that we've seen over the years, just so you can get an idea of what's out there and how they differ. And also that there isn't really one way to design a mixing control room. There have been many attempts to which all have been basically there to solve the same problem, which is how do you reduce the impact of the room on what the speakers are doing while not putting people in an anechoic chamber. It's kind of as simple as that. There have been different, sort of attempts to solve this problem, and some of them have been better than others, apparently. Yeah, if you'd like me to make a video about the different types of control room design, so live and dead end, obviously non-environment, reflection-free zone, there are a bunch of different ones, and how they differentiate, or how you can differentiate between them, let me know. Cool, good question. Here's one by DJ Victor Nova. If you mix in an untreated room, but you also check your mix in another location, such as a car or another studio, is that actually fair to say that you are capable of mixing in an untreated room? Yes. I'm not entirely sure how to answer this. It's a fun question, but yeah, of course. And I think we all work from untreated rooms to varying degrees. I don't think there's a one definite answer to what a treated room is. It is a question of how far do you go in terms of treatment to implement a certain goal. And I think no home studio, or very, very few home studios, have gone all out to really fully implement a certain goal. We are all kind of on that journey of treating our rooms. So in a way, we are all mixing in untreated or partially treated rooms, if you will. Yeah, I hope that relieves some stress, I guess. I don't know, or at least gives you some pride, some reference. Let's leave it at that. Here's one by Iris Manta. It was on my video on matching speaker volumes by ear using pink noise. So Iris asks, what about if we play this pink noise and measure the SPL from one speaker each time with an SPL meter? REW has an SPL meter and we can use a measurement microphone. Also, do you believe that in association with the acoustic treatment, in order to correct further the frequency response, we could change the settings from the back side of the monitors? For example, my monitors attenuate the frequency range at about 160 Hertz. That has to do with the reflections from the desk. I compared the two measurements before and after, and the peak at around 160 Hertz has been tamed well. Thanks. Okay, there's a bunch of questions in here, but I like them, so let's get into it. So first of all, yes, you can use pink noise and measure the SPL from each speaker in order to match the speaker volumes, but that is only if both speakers basically have a symmetric response. If both speakers give pretty much the exact same frequency response at the listening position. And in a fully symmetric room, that will be the case. And then you can use measurements to match the speaker volumes from both speakers. My video was aimed at double checking that with your ears, but also because many rooms have slight asymmetries that aren't massive. I mean, some of them do have massive asymmetries around the listening position, around the speakers, but even with slight asymmetries, you might find that it shifts your stereo image and your phantom center. And it can be tricky by looking at measurements and just by looking at measurements to decide where that ideal balance between those two measurements needs to be in order for the phantom center to sit in the middle. It's actually much easier in that case to just use your ears. Okay, so that's what that was about. Now, to the second part of your question, yeah, you can and you should use the EQ on the back of your speakers to better match their responses. If there are differences that you can improve with the EQ on the back of your speakers. I think that's the important thing here, right? There's no point in using the low shell filter that most speakers have, for example, if there's no difference there between your two speakers. But yeah, if you have a certain difference between the speakers and you can get them closer by using the EQ on the back, go for it. Absolutely. That's what they're there for. In combination with obviously adjusting for sort of slightly for their positioning and sometimes for the desk reflection. So yeah, good question. And one final one by Northern Codes. Can you please talk about a studio desk? I mean, a lot of people say that some acoustical problems are caused by the reflection from the desk. Yes. So first of all, I have an article on my website, which I'll link, I guess, in the description, because for some reason I can't do it in the card, where I walk you through how to pick the right studio desk for your room. This was before the days that I did YouTube videos, so it's still a blog post, but there's diagrams in there, there are measurements in there that show you what the effect of the right desk is, including the desk reflection. So I'm just going to point you at that because it is a much deeper, much broader resource for answering that question than I could in a few minutes here. So with that, thanks for watching. One final note, if you are in the process of treating your room and you are getting confused, maybe you're starting to think like you're turning in circles with your thoughts about what the next step is that you need to do, or there's a problem, you're noticing a problem and you don't really know what the right approach will be to remedy that problem, I want you to download my home studio treatment framework at the link in the description. It is my 5 steps that I go through to treat a room, a home studio, starting with looking at the actual physical space, empty room, dimensions, all that stuff, setting up, finding your listening position, figuring out which side to face, which wall to face with your setup, then going through porous absorption, going through equalization, going through sub-setup, how to incorporate measurements into this process, speaker decoupling. It's all in there, but broken down into the 5 main steps that you need to follow in order, in sequence, so that you build on so that each of those steps builds on the one before, and you don't turn in circles while you're planning the treatment of your room, while you're going through that process. So if that's the case with you, please download my home studio treatment framework at the link in the description. Go through the steps. I promise they work. They have proven themselves hundreds of times all around the world. It is a simple process. It's just a matter of sorting your thoughts, sorting through the different steps, understanding what you use each step for, what you're looking for while you're going through each of those steps. So again, please download that at the link in the description. But for now, that's it. Thanks again for joining me in the new year. Let's get back to trusting our ears and having fun working on music in the studio more than ever. I hope I see you in the next video. Thanks.